I have to remind you the views that are expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and, well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of our good friend, Bob Chapman. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Well, I'm just fine, and I hope you are as well.
Oh, well, of course, we are living in the most exciting times. We really are.
Well, we certainly are, and, it's been this way, Stan, for, I guess, the last 50 years.
Well, but I really think that we're moving towards a climax in history right at the present time. Certainly the way this financial situation is going. My understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it would appear that many of the major banks are actually cutting back on their lending instead of expanding on it. What's your take on that?
Well, they say that the Fed, under the former Goldman CEO, Mr. Paulson, forced them to take this money. And I don't believe that for 1 second. In fact, I was in the brokerage business for 28 years, and I don't believe anything that they say. I mean, you've got to be there to experience it. And so these banks are still on the edge. And if they need money, they'll get it back. And the reason that they went through this folderol was to show people that the banks were going to be, if they weren't before, solvent with the money. But they don't want the money now, and the reason why is they can't make $100 or $300 or $500 million a year. That's what this is all about.
In other words, as long as they have the government money, why they can't give these exorbitant bonuses to the CEOs, is that right?
They'll have to make, $2 or $3 million a year. I mean, that's chump change for these guys.
Well, I think it's really one of the most amazing things that, certainly during the heyday of the housing bubble, when, of course, they were making fabulous sums of money in the large banks, and about a third of it was going to the administration. The rest, it wasn't going to the bank. It wasn't going to the people who owned stock in the bank. It was going to the very brokers who created the problem that ultimately led to the destruction of our whole economic system, and they're still getting those big bonuses. That's what's so amazing to me.
Well, it's not amazing. It's that they're all in it together. What are they in together? They're in different groups, and they all belong to the same group, which is the Illuminati. And that's what this is all about. CFR, Trilateral Commission, on and on. And these people are interconnected. They take care of each other. And if you step out of line and you do something you're not supposed to, you die.
It was really so interesting last night. There was a 60-minute interview with Mr. Liddy, who, of course, took over AIG for $1 a year. He's just a man who was just dedicated to helping out, a patriot. And he commented that, what he was at AIG for was so that we could repay the American people. And he kept stressing he was there so that he could get the money back for the American people. But he ended up giving $12.5 billion to his friends at Goldman Sachs, and another $12.5 billion to his friends over at J.P. Morgan. And I think it was what I don't know, maybe $80 billion he gave away to his friends. How is that going to get the money back for the American people? As I'm sitting listening to him last night on 60 Minutes, I'm wondering, why doesn't somebody ask him, why did he negotiate with the Goldman Sachs and these others so he wouldn't have to give them so much money? If he's really trying to get the money back for the American people, why is he giving all the money to his friends? And we'll be back in just a moment here at Radio Liberty. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay. Our guest this afternoon is Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, and we're talking about what's really going on, the total corruption. I was just commenting that last night on 60 Minutes they had a Mr. Liddy there. I believe his name is Edward Liddy, but he, of course, he was formerly with one of the major insurance companies. He's working now for AIG for $1 a year, and he claims he's there as the patriot because he wants to, of course, to get the money that the government is investing in AIG back to the American taxpayers. And yet we know, of course, that he gave out, I don't know how many $billion. Well, we know he gave $12.5 billion to his friends at Goldman Sachs, which he owns stock in, incidentally. Another $12.5 billion to his friends at J.P. Morgan Chase, and I don't know how much money he gave out there altogether. But, billions and billions of dollars, and nobody would ask him in the interview there on 60 Minutes, well, if you're really trying to get the money back for the American taxpayers, why did you give all that money to your friends? Why didn't you just tell them you can't have it? We're not going to give it to you. Nobody asked that question, Bob?
No, well, the man is obviously a liar. I mean, he can't think that we're going to believe something as an inane as that. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just like the AIG deal. It wasn't until Bloomberg probed we finally found out. And Bloomberg got a court order from a federal court judge, and the Fed would not tell the federal court judge who got the money and why and how it was spent. And the Fed said, look, we might damage the reputations of these lending institutions, and besides, it's a state secret. Well, wait a minute now. The Fed is a private organization. How could it be a state secret?
And of course, the things you're talking
the
about...
arrogance brought this about. It was $101.4 billion was funneled through AIG to mostly foreign banks.
Oh, really? That's
that AIG owed money to.
Well, I think, of course, the tragedy is there's about $2 trillion that's disappeared. There's about $4 trillion they put on now. I mean, $1 trillion is a lot of money. I mean, in fact, it took us 200 years to amass, $1 trillion in debt, and they're just giving away $2 trillion to their friends in foreign banks. We'll be back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Bob was just saying that finally, apparently, they found out that the Fed has given well over $100 and some odd billion to foreign banks. How much did they give away?
$101.4 billion, and it went to some American banks as well, but most of it went to foreign banks.
And this is just mostly to stabilize them, to get them through this difficult economic time. Is that what it's all about?
I'll tell you what happened very quickly. AIG wrote derivative contracts. In other words, they supplied insurance for events, so to speak, and they didn't keep any money to cover their losses. They ran naked, threw the money on the bottom line, and took it in bonuses. And so over $100 billion was owed. So the Fed stepped in with taxpayer funds and paid all these entities off. That's really what it's about.
And of course,
the criminal behavior is beyond anything that's ever happened at any time in the world.
I mean, some of these people were making $50 or $100 million a year in bonuses who actually destroyed AIG. And not only that, but instead of firing them, they've kept them on board and paying them large bonuses, saying, well, we need them to unwind these derivative contracts that nobody else understands except them. I mean, why aren't they fired a long time ago? Oh, we couldn't do that. We wouldn't know what to do with all these contracts if we fired them. I mean, any logical person would say these people should be fired, but we're not dealing with logical people. We're dealing with Mr. Liddy, who's working for $1 a year and funneling money to a company he owns stock in. Isn't that interesting?
Well, not only that, he's a liar, and I'm sure after this is over, he's going to get well paid for what he's doing. I mean, these people do anything they want to do.
Right.
And that's why we got to do away with the Fed, which is behind the whole thing, which is the nucleus, the core of all this, and we have to implement tariffs on goods and services. Otherwise, we don't have a country left. It's over.
Well, certainly the great tragedy is America is the largest debt nation in the entire world, in the entire history of the world. And of course, we are, going to be running a deficit, even by the Obama figures, of about $1.82 trillion this year. That's the latest figure. I think it's going to be a lot more than that. What do you think?
2.5.
So they're simply lying to the American people, and then when it comes about, they're going to just shrug and say, oh, well, we had no idea. Of course they have an idea. They just don't want to tell the American people that they're trying to bankrupt our nation because they want to destroy our nation, because they want to merge us into a world government. And when you understand that, it all begins to make sense. Otherwise, nothing going on makes sense. In the same way, they wanted to destroy Christianity. That's why they appointed people to the Supreme Court who belonged to a secret society, the Masons. And at one point, the Masons controlled the Supreme Court.